This budget, in terms of tax and spend, is £74 billion in spending by the end of this Parliament, £41 billion in tax rises. I have done a number of budgets, and this scorecard, in terms, I have never seen anything like it, and I've done this for 15 years. It's the biggest budget I have ever covered. It is incredibly definitive in terms of a kind of very Labour budget of big tax and big spend. But I think the issue here is, while Rachel Reeves talked there about choices, Rishi Sunak gave the counter-argument, which I think will now be chewed over ferociously, actually, which is this was not laid out in the manifesto. This is not what the Labour government implied. When I asked the Prime Minister at our leader...
By now, everyone has already heard about the £22 billion black hole, the Labour Party's favourite hideout where they hide their debts. How can you forget the day Rachel Reeves took to the stage with a shocking budget? And if that statement wasn't enough, it was the complacency with which she outlined her plans in case of future disasters that really pissed people off. Calling this an atrocity may seem like an exaggeration, but let's be honest. When your own Chancellor seems ready to undermine a country's financial stability, it doesn't promote trust, does it?
I've got the manifesto here. Where in this manifesto does it say that the next Labour government is going to increase spending by £74 billion and raise taxes by £40 billion? Because I have looked through it and I can't find it.
Well, you'll know that when I became Chancellor in July, that officials at the Treasury presented me with information that the previous government were overspending to the tune of £22 billion more than they had planned. In addition to that, there were compensation schemes that the previous government had signed up to but had not budgeted for. Infected blood and the Post Office Horizon scandal. And thirdly, I'll just finish this point, and thirdly, the previous government hadn't done a spending review that took us beyond this year, and inflation had put huge...
But here we are stuck listening to the esteemed Chancellor, who is used to kicking the British when they are already on edge. And now she is trying to justify her robbery in front of everyone, blaming the ghosts of the previous government. The Conservatives failed to win. But isn't that the point? That is why the public rejected them and gave the Labour Party a chance to be saved. If people were really excited about the Tory circus, do you really think Starmer would be hanging around Downing Street enjoying all the privileges? No way, the voters would be unhappy. That's not what they voted for, is it? No, and it passed with a very low percentage of votes. He ended up in his place by default, because people were unhappy with the Conservatives. They voted for the Labour Party, they didn't particularly like him, and now it's even worse.
Taxes, it's the biggest tax-raising budget since 1993. It's gigantic. And you said before the election, no plans to raise taxes or the preempted beyond the £8 billion that you had earmarked. So a lot of people out there are going to be quite shocked today.
Well, in the decisions that we've made in the budget today, I accept that this is a big and a substantial budget.
But
it wasn't the budget that I was.
It wasn't the budget. Straight with them.
It wasn't the budget that I was expecting to deliver when I became Chancellor on the 5th of July. I didn't think that any government would be so reckless to have £22 billion
You've
of
lifted
unfunded
taxes by
commitments.
£40 billion.
I absolutely recognise that. In our manifesto, we had commitments of £8.5 billion. In addition, as I said.
And what did people get in return? Nothing good. The Labour Party squandered its money on insanely high taxes and even paid pensioners winter fuel allowances, the only thing that kept them warm during the cold winter months. And yet, somehow Reeves still finds the audacity to strut around, defending these heartless decisions as if she had done something great for the nation. Looking into the eyes of the £22 billion black hole that the Conservatives have left this year, and with a triple cap that guarantees that the state pension will rise by only £1,700 during the term of this Parliament, I can't help but consider it a disgrace. This clowning eventually led the Labour Party to where they deserve to be, to complete humiliation. £40 billion of taxes. The previous government established powers for payment control authorities, and, surprisingly, we did not know this, and neither did you know, that they had not established accessibility criteria for these authorities.
If you accept, Chancellor, even if you accept the £22 billion black hole, 8 billion of that is because you decided to settle public sector pay disputes. Are you telling me, seriously, that you did not have an inkling before the general election that you might have to find billions of pounds to settle those pay disputes? And why didn't you level with the British public about that?
The previous government set the remit for the pay review bodies, the independent pay review bodies. And astonishingly, and we did not know this, and you did not know this either, they hadn't set an affordability criteria for the pay review bodies. Two of the pay review bodies, on defence and education, had already reported before the general election was called.
Two control bodies in the field of defence and education have already reported before the general elections were called, and the previous government took advantage of this information. It was an inherited pressure that had accumulated from the previous government. And let's talk about the fact that Rachel Reeves, who never stops complaining about the financial mess the Tories have plunged her into, thoughtlessly threw away more than £4.3 billion to illegal immigrants, as if it were a trifle for pocket expenses. Today, ministers are announcing the allocation of millions of additional funds to lawyers who, as I know, will represent the interests of asylum seekers to help deal with the backlog of appeals preventing migrants from being evicted from hotels. Of course, we all want these people to get approval and start paying for their own accommodation, of course, at the expense of their huge salaries of engineers, astronauts, and neurosurgeons. After all, we all know that they are just like that. And while we're on the subject, who could forget how the Labour Party allocated a whopping £22.3 billion to junior doctors and nurses in the National Health Service, who were already receiving decent salaries simply because they wanted to have more in their pockets.
Breton told me repeatedly before the general election, when I kept saying to him, the NHS is going to need more funding, he repeatedly kept saying, funding is not the answer, we're going to get it through growth. You have just announced £22.6 billion in extra day-to-day spending for the NHS. You just were not straight with the British people, and they will see through this. You were not straight.
We announced in the general election campaign that there would be an immediate injection of cash.
It was a few billion pounds which you had costed.
Into
this is
£22.6
billion.
When Wes became Health Secretary on the 5th of July, he asked Lord Darcy, independent peer, to do a review about the state of our National Health Service. And the report was damning and it was shocking. But Wes was also told that unless more money was available, the number of appointments...
Chancellor,
Today, the government confirmed that it has offered junior doctors an average salary increase of 22.3%. This means that the junior doctors who have been fighting for their rights and on strike for the last 20 months have been seeking a salary increase of about 25%. So, what was all this financial tension about? Or was it just a show-off, when poor people demanded respect for their rights? Let's be honest, there is not a single excuse that could justify this. The Labour Party is responsible for the crimes they have committed against the British.
Are you honestly saying that you have a democratic mandate for the measures that you have announced today? Tens of billions of pounds in increased spending and tens of billions of pounds of tax rises, none of which is in this document. You have a democratic mandate for this.
The first line of the first step in our manifesto was to return stability to our economy. That is the most important thing that I had to do as Chancellor. And we do have a mandate for bringing that stability back to the economy.
I think there'll be a lot of people thinking that they voted for you and you have just done the biggest tax and spend budget that we have seen for decades, and that is not what they signed up for.
There were two choices that I had to make today as Chancellor of the Exchequer. The first was whether I was going to be open and honest.
Do you accept that, though? Can you see that the public might feel cheated?
During the general election campaign, we announced the immediate allocation of funds, which cost you several £billion. Now this amount has reached £22.6 billion. Let's not sugarcoat the situation. Starmer's rule in Downing Street led to financial ruin. And the jokes of the Labour Party about the police strategy only drive them deeper into the political grave. When this government either collapses or is kicked out, Reeves and her comrades may be out of work and without excuses. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you soon.